The Meilong 4M has been my main for most of 2020, I would say, and it has taken over the Aosu GTS1, which by the way is the same cube as the RS4M. Moi just rebranded their former flagship into a budget cube, but that will be a topic for another time. So the Meilong that I use is the 2019 version that came in this box, and it is non-magnetic by default. And I also got it in black because I wanted to avoid frosted plastic, and at the same time I had spare stickers. After I made the Light S4M, because I used mini Uchiha stickers on this cube and I had some leftover stickers. My Meilong has been magnetized with stronger magnets than most factory cubes, and it's also one of the minority cubes in my collection who has been looped with these things instead of this one. In 2020, Moi released a 2 to 5 lineup of factory magnetic Meilongs. A special mention has to go out to the 5x5 because it appears to have a new mechanism, a new mold, and it's also 60mm instead of the original 62. So it's more than just a re-release of the same cube, but more like a totally new cube altogether. But for the 2, 3 and 4, I know nothing about the 2, but at least I've tried the 3 and 4 and I know that they are more or less re-releases of the same cube. So regarding how I set up this factory magnetic Meilong, I've used a small amount of the cubical loops like Dignitas and Gravitas, but less than my own main, and I also mix it in with some of the Kelvin's high viscosity. So I cannot really directly compare stickerless shades between the old and the new Meilongs because I got my original in black, but I know the old one comes in the MF3 RS2 shades. The new one is the Aosu WR shades, and like you can kind of see the differences here. I'll say generally the new one is much more vibrant and I like it better than the old shades. I'm going to start with a matte comparison just to show that I'm dealing with the same cube. So in typical fashion, the Meilongs has a double anchor, and the proportions are more or less different from the original Aosu, because in the original Aosu, which is like I think it's, as far as I know, it's the first double anchor cube to exist. The Aosu will have a very small top anchor and a very big bottom one, but the Meilong, they are relatively similar and quite the same size, and I would say it's actually quite similar to an Uchiha. This is how the Meilong compares to an Uchiha. You can see that the Uchiha has quite a lot more features because this edge has a smaller bump here that goes under this edge. And there's also another feature where the middle layer is slightly fatter at the base. So if you can see from the side, it's actually not flat. The edge is slightly higher than the corner because like if you were to pluck out the big internal piece in the middle, it's actually fatter down there and thinner on top, which will counter this shape. So here's a close-up of the 2 Max. The Meilong also goes with an old-style mechanism where the corner is a 3-piece design and it splits into 3 all the way down to the stock and the base. Whereas the other cube that I have here is the Aosu GTS1, and it goes with the newer design, which is 4-piece. The corner head was split into 3, while the stock and the base is 1 unified piece, which I think this one is actually much stronger because you don't have to divide the smallest and supposedly the weakest part into 3. It's just 1 unified piece, so it's much harder to break, but I have not encountered breaking problems on the Meilong at all. And I feel like the choice of how the piece is split on the Meilong is possibly because it reduces the number of parts you need to cast in the mold, because now you need to put 3 pieces into the mold instead of 4, so it might help to drop the cost. And even between the 2020 and 2019 versions of the Meilong, there are 2 major changes, even though it's the same cube and the same Mac. So it's like the first one out of the 2 changes is the magnet slots. So you can see the original version has no magnet slots. I just glued the magnet in by myself, while the newer version has slots for the magnets. And another difference is the internal piece, and this is more of a color difference than anything else. Like, the pieces still shape the same, it's just that the old one has primary internals, the new one has black internals. For the actual feel, just based on memories on the Aosu WRM and the MGC, which I no longer have those 2 cubes, so take what I say with a pinch of salt because I'm just judging based on memory and not physically trying the cubes out in front of me anymore. And I'll say that the Meilong is more or less in between those 2, so it has a softer and more flexible feel than the MGC, but at the same time it's a little bit stiffer than the Aosu WRM, and it has a nice fluidity in its turning when transitioning from one layer to the next. The magnet is also in between the 2, it's stronger than the MGC but weaker than the Aosu WR. Overall, I would say that the Meilong magnets are on the weak side. The inners are slightly stronger than the outers, which allows you to have a nicer 3x3 stage, but at the same time the difference is very minimal, so it gives the cube a consistent feel, and like the turning is also really smooth, and apart from one like slight crunch on the outer layer, I do think that it's mostly a smooth cube, but it's more of a matte finish kind of. Despite the weaker magnets and the slight flexibility, I still think the Meilong feels quite tight and it doesn't flop around or squish easily. So I think the cube that takes that concept to the extreme is the original Uchiha. So the with the Uche, you actually have quite a strong spring force that holds the whole cube together. So this is a non-magnetic Uche and it feels almost as stable. In fact, I would say it's comparable to a magnetic cube. And although partly because this is a gummy, not used for quite long cubes, so like the loop itself is sticking the layers together in the same way the magnets would. But at the same time, there's quite a strong spring force holding the cube itself. And the Meilong has some degree of that same spring force. Really find that it's quite stable. For corner cutting, I would say you can cut about 1.1 QBs forwards and close to half, if not slightly over half reverse, which I'll probably say that about most other 4x4. So this is the old Meilong and you cut the same amount. And just for fun, also GTS1 and Uche. As for pops, I've not gotten a single pop on either Meilong, and for the speed of the cube, I would say that the Meilong is slightly slower than the MGC and also WR and has slightly more friction and more spring force, like I mentioned the spring force earlier. But at the same time, it's also the lightest one out of the three, and I think turning is still faster than most 4x4s outside this set of top 3 4x4s. Another major feature of the Meilong is that it's 59mm, which is, in my opinion, that's the perfect size of a 4x4. It allows for more like 3x3 style finger tricks, like the RUR prime pinching grip, the D prime with your left ring finger, and also maybe some degrees of back insert as well. I do find that it's nicer to do all these moves on the Meilong than compared to most other 4x4s, except the also WR because that's also 59. Comparing Meilong versus Meilong, I would say that the super strong magnets of my original Meilong are probably of GTS 3 strength, and it kind of turns this cube into an Uche WRM, meaning the transformations that turn the also GTS 2 into also WR, but more or less applied to an Uche as a base cube. I'm describing that from a feel perspective, not a mech perspective. Mostly making the cube smaller and crunchier. And of course, the Meilong is being a budget cube. It has a more budget plastic, but apart from that, it has the feel I get kind of feels more chi than moi, and it's the closest I can get to having a VALP 5 as a 4x4, except like not ruined by limited and restrictive corner cutting or super big inner versus outer layer magnet strength difference, which was the case with the real VALP 4. But like even then, it's still not exactly the same because my Meilong magnets are still significantly stronger than my VALP 5 magnets. So the plus point of the strong magnetic Meilong is that it's very stable and very reliable for executing short bursts of TPS at high speeds, namely for the PL and the parity. And it's also a lot harder to slip up or accidentally misalign a layer, but the minus point is it lacks the softness and fluidity of the weak magnetic version, and it's just overall very choppy and snappy, and it requires more force to turn, and it's also slightly heavier than the newer Meilong because the magnets I use are slightly bigger in size than what I put in here. Overall, I would say weak magnets is slightly better. If you do like my description of the stronger magnetic Meilong, you can either follow my setup plus magnetization tutorial of the original non-magnetic Meilong, or you can just buy the factory magnetized version and stack the magnets on top of the existing ones. Overall, I think my conclusion on the Meilong is pretty much the best budget 4x4, and I would go as far as to rank it as the third best 4x4 on the market after the MGC and the also WRM, and that would be my recommendation for most people. And I feel that with the top 3 cubes being at 3 different price range, and they represent, specifically the Meilong will represent budget, the MGC will represent mid-tier, and also WRM will represent full premium. They can more or less collectively cover a wide consumer base. But for me, however, I would rank the Meilong second instead of third because I do think I like it quite a lot better than the MGC. A big part of that goes to just because I like 59 better than 60. Comparing the new Meilong with the MGC, I average about 46 on both, but I think the new Meilong is 46 point, like the decimals will show a smaller number. And well, on the old one, I can average about 45. But even then, bear in mind the Meilong's break-in time. I doubt I'm actually seeing the new Meilong in its full potential, and like this cube has been extensively broken in. It didn't overtake my GTS1 immediately overnight when it was set up. I was actually using my GTS1 for quite a long time and then switching between these two for quite a long time until eventually this one came out on top, which is something I normally don't get a lot with 4x4s, but like yeah, I do think that the Meilong has quite a long break-in time, and by the end of all that, it's actually better than I originally thought. The same could apply to the new Meilong, knowing very well it's literally the same cube just with slightly different magnets.